Dr. Drew and I were in the next room in my office, and we plumbed in big monitors. We're like doing play-by-play on the EEG, like we're sportscasters. And dissociative, big swells of huge dissociative deltas. And that's what you see generally when people do their thing, is this like increase of slow, disinhibited brain waves, deltas, thetas, alphas. But I have a pet psychic I'm working with, and
hey.
Oh, sorry. I think we just went live. I have to go mute my other computer. Because it's making noise now. But the pet psychic's doing two different things, and you see the different EEG signatures based on what she's doing. And she repeated it 2 months later. So I'll be right back and turn off my other speakers.
While you're turning it off, doctor, I went to a psychic and they asked me my name, and I just had to walk away.
Right. They asked you for your credit card number. Shouldn't you know that already? Come on.
Never. It's on Tuesday. Well, no, actually not.
When you take this to the realm of not psychic interventions and not mystic kinds of things, which I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm there. But I had an opportunity many years ago to work with a woman came to me. She was a social worker, and she specialized in people who had been, best description is ritualistically abused in their childhoods. And these people had multiple personalities. I mean, it's been called so many different things. And having spent some time as a psych nurse, I went, yeah, right. That's a great excuse to get out of stuff in life. Yeah, multiple personalities are right. So, but I thought, well, let's see if I can help them. There were 5 women. Each one had sort of a different agenda. But a little by, and initially just like I'm sitting there going, well, let's see what we can do. Visual stuff, right? And then one day, one of the ladies was sitting in the chair, and suddenly the EEG utterly changed, like as if somebody else was sitting in the chair. And I stood up, and I thought, either the electrodes have fallen off or she's fallen asleep or something, right? I couldn't even justify that change. But I said to her, are you okay? And she said, why do you ask? I'm like, no big deal, really. But there were some changes over here that I'm looking at. She goes, nobody knows. I have worked for years to make sure that nobody knows when I switch personalities. I went, well, you might not want to have EEG electrodes on your head then.
Yeah.
So it led me to trying to understand this. And I talked to the social worker and I said, would any of these, because every single one of them, because of their circumstances, their personality could be triggered. The social worker was aware of all their triggers, and one of the women volunteered to show me. And her social worker came in and went through the process of triggering each personality so that I could see the EEG that represented that. And by the time it was finished, tears were rolling down my face. I couldn't imagine how painful that must be. One of the personalities was that of a 4-year-old child, and her EEG looked like a 4-year-old child. It was just like, and the one who was the most scary for her, vigilance was the issue. And that person had the smallest theta band I've ever seen, which would put them in a sort of vigilant state, I would guess. But anyway, so yes, the human EEG is certainly capable of a very range of whatever. But most of us like to keep our EEG pretty stable, pretty predictable, because it runs so much of the rest of us.
Were these individuals within this human each aware of the others, or some were and some won't? Some were and some weren't.
Some more than others.
Yeah, that's usually only true right at the end of healing. When you have true dissociative identity disorder, you have generally less integration unless somebody's integrating. Very strange phenomena seeing DID.
Just when we think we've got it all figured out.
I wasn't running any kind of a QEEG on them, no.
I have had QEEGs in people's heads when they go into alters, and you do see big changes.
There you go.
So,
I was wondering if it's connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony,
I mean, sure, but connectivity is hard to read in real time because it's influenced by so much stuff, including noise. So I don't know. Is the short answer about connectivity.
Anthony, can you take care of Ben?
Yeah, Joy got it. He just mentioned, would you be able to see it with connectivity? I will say, I think there's a paper out there that said that power and coherence and connectivity are kind of all correlated. So if it's causing an amplitude change, conceivably you might see connectivity and coherence. But
Well, I think that, I mean, to tell Ben that the thing that I was watching, the events that I was seeing were not just like, oh, the connectivity changed or whatever. It was literally like a 4-year-old child had sat in the chair and all of the wave characteristics, the slow waves that we would expect in that age group popped onto the screen. But the person was awake and alert and, but they were talking and interacting like they were 4.
wow.
So it was not small pieces. It was like the entire generation of whatever they were doing was different with each personality.
Anthony, what's hot on your news and notes with you and John? What have you guys been chit-chatting about?
I mean, John, do you want to go first or me? Just news stories that we saw.
No, I sent you something a couple hours ago. What the heck was it?
Well,
And
he
of
said
course-
it was an fMRI study about, they found that the salience network, I think
Right.
he said, is twice the size in depressed patients.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I was hoping Jay could have some EEG
Yeah.
correlate on as opposed to the fMRI. But
Yeah,
it-
it's an EEG study
it's a
looking
long
at-
research paper, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but it's
Mhm.
seemed interesting. Twice the
I think
size.
there's
I'm
an
not even
EEG
sure what's.
study on addiction and paraphernalia with the salience network. If you see your
Okay.
paraphernalia, your salience network lights up with increased ERPs, I believe, increased B300s.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So that piece of it.
Look who we
Speaking
got.
of-
Yeah.
There he
You
is.
summoned him, John. You
I did. I said,
spoke his name, and
and here he is.
Did your EEG change when you summoned him? No.
We
Exactly.
hope not. We hope not.
You're 0102. Are you sure that doesn't nothing?
Check your coordination, John. Are you okay?
Yeah. Jay, we were just starting to talk about, I think you probably got it. I'm not even sure if you've had a chance to look at it. There was an fMRI study just published about depression, and the salience network was oversized in people with depression. I'm not even sure what size means, frankly, but and Anthony was asking if there was any EEG correlation from your perspective versus an fMRI kind of study. And by the way, Anthony, you said something about the small sample size in fMRI studies.
Yeah, there's a Nature paper that says most MRI studies have 23 participants. And so everybody's always ragging on EEG.
Right.
But this is the
that's
supposed gold standard or what have you. So
that's the one that made me laugh. I was like, Jesus,
No.
that we're thrilled when we get 23 people.
There was an issue in the neurology journal, the big green neurology journal, that was focused on autism, and the largest study they had structurally in the MRI was an N of 7.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
You need to characterize a group, you need 25, 30 people, but that's to characterize a group that's a relatively, consistent group. If you have a group that's made up of a bunch of groups, you need a whole big bunch to have a bunch of groups of about 25 within it. So you literally need thousands and thousands of people to do a good study to allow the phenotypes to separate out and the effect on any given phenotype to be identified. But with respect to the anterior cingulate salience network, it's the anterior cingulate and the anterior insulae on both sides is the largest contributor to that network, and it's described differentially in pain medicine as the distress network, but there's nothing more salient than distress. So, same thing. But it's also identified in Dirk de Ridder's machine learning algorithm looking for the dysrhythmia as depression being at the anterior cingulate. And it since then has been identified as a more generalized category than just depression, as a reward deficiency. And that includes addiction, reward deficiency. As a category, reward deficiency was pretty well characterized by Kent Blum over the last 20 years. He's written about it. So, and it's a big one in addiction. Obviously, in our addiction research, we found that 1/3 of the addicted population was driven by an anterior cingulate drive, not by an over-arousal drive. 2/3 had over-arousal, and those 2/3 did get alpha theta as their treatment, not based on the fact that they were addicted, but based on their QEG endophenotype, having that as the end goal of the training. And the others got anterior cingulate, and depends upon what was up there. You can have 3 failure modes to the anterior cingulate. So it's important to kind of look before you just jump in symptomatically with a specific protocol for that spot. TMS, for instance, assumes it needs excitation, and they get their double cone coil 1.5 to 3 Tesla magnet, and they point it at the anterior cingulate to excite it. If it's got beta spindles as a failure pattern, they will make the person worse acutely right then and there in the chair. It's not the dominant pattern. Alpha is the dominant pattern. If it's a little bit slow, their stimulation will work. If it's a theta pattern, their stimulation will work. Less likely than the alpha pattern, but it will work to excite it. The reward deficiency network does respond to the ketamine, psilocybin style therapeutic approach. Again, with the differentiation that Andrew gave it, that this is not I'm taking some every day to make my brain more connected somehow, but it's a therapeutic effect of a well-intentioned and well-designed therapeutic intervention.
I wonder if that signature in that paper is the same, or tapping into the same thing that Dr. Andy Lichter found, the accordance measure that shifts under SSRIs. You can tell about a week into SSRI administration if the depression is going to lift based on the change in a ratio of absolute power to relative power in the frontal areas. I wonder if it's picking up the same shift, the same frontostriatal connectivity. Sounds like it might be.
It's a good possibility. I mean, they're tapping into that as a feature. It's not like accordance was picked up as a metric by a whole bunch of people. It was a metric that was actually licensed, and Qmetrics got a license, and one of our people that was trying to get a contract with UCLA picked up one to kind of get on their good side, But there was only a handful of licenses ever taken out for the accordance measurement. It's and if you ask most of the big name experts in the EEG field what is accordance, they'll scratch their head and kind of wonder it's some kind of a thing. I don't know. UCLA
That's
did
the
it.
ratio of absolute to relative power at
and if they're both going in the same direction in absolute and relative, that's accordant. If one goes up and one goes down for absolute and relative, that's discordant or not concordant. So there's a rationale to their metric, but it's not something that's commonly used. I have seen it's actually executed in Brain Vision Analyzer, but I don't know that they bought a license for it. So, but they might have just given up on selling licenses.
Yeah, Dr. Lichter for a while would just give away the spreadsheet to calculate it to anyone who asked. Hey, here's the spreadsheet. Here's how you calculate it. Have fun. So he wasn't super. He wasn't protecting the IP necessarily. He was just At UCLA, if you do things that are part of your research, they get really annoyed if you don't like monetize it and try to share money with them. A few people have gotten in trouble at UCLA. A few scientists have for like putting the names on products and then not giving UCLA money back from that. So.
Kind of the opposite of old academic Europe, where the academics would basically give away whatever they were doing for free if you wanted it. Basically, Berbaumer would give you a circuit diagram of how their DC amp worked and the parts list, so you could actually build your own DC amp, and the code for their little, it's like a Pong game. It's very simple code. The little rocket ship that would fly across, and it would randomly pick the trajectory and the spot that would come off of, and you could control the speed of the rocket ship and the size of the window that the person's slow cortical potential is controlling. Those are your two inputs to control. The rest of it was all random number generator for the rocket and the speed. Anyway, he would give that to anybody who wanted to try and replicate their work. So, and he's still around. He's one of the very last legs of the table. All the rest of them have passed. So Niels is still around and published recently on implanted brain-computer interface, speak to think, think to talk.
Ben Southall has a question. He wanted to know how the thalamocortical dysrhythmia is defined mathematically, was the word he used. So,
well, if you get the paper by Van Nest, it starts out with the mathematics of it. But essentially, the way they're looking for it, they're looking for slowed alpha at about 6 cycles a second. And they're looking for a gamma surround around it, like a little donut. And they look for the gamma using Hilbert transform, which is a nonlinear approach to EEG done by, blocking on his name. Anyway, the Hilbert transform looks for the high frequency without power, but with respect to rhythmicity. It can also be identified using wavelets just as easily as an event-related synchronization, desynchronization. But the difference is that the gamma that they find is on a consistent basis. It doesn't chirp on and off like normal gamma. So it's a pathological form. And the slowed thalamocortical column is surrounded by the gamma. And the gamma is linearly related to the tinnitus intensity, the sensation of pain, the rigidity or frozen postures in Parkinsonism, and to an aspect of the depression. But it's hard to explain that by comparison to the physical things.
Okay.
Stan.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan. Take care of Stan, Anthony.
We have another question by Stan here. I'll quote, what do you make of the alpha rebound effect in a case of training down persistent eyes open alpha? Is it something that should be trained through, or will it reduce over time?
I don't believe in training through. Training through, let me tell you what it translates for me in a clinical practice. If this protocol I have worked with a client on produces a negative effect, there's something wrong with what I taught it. I should get no effect sometimes or some positive effect. But if it gets a negative effect, something about the protocol was wrong. So the question about training through any of it, no, I think what you can do, Stan, is successfully persist in teaching your brain how to do exactly that over and over and over again. So if that's the state you'd like to establish, training it and waiting until you train through it might be a great way to do it. Also, there's many more than one way to train down eyes open alpha. So
unless anybody has anything else on that one, I'd just like to throw out there, since our last chat last week, Brett Favre has come forward and said he's got Parkinson's. Did you catch that, Anthony?
Yeah, we did. And I sent a follow-up that they think as many as 1/3 of former NFL players have undiagnosed CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
The show we have coming out on NeuroNoodle tomorrow morning, Jay addresses that specifically, Parkinson's and repeated hats. Not so much ALS like I thought, Jay. You set me straight. But I think more.
But I have an N of 1 for Parkinson's. As you all know, I have a clinical practice, and my mom was diagnosed when she was like 73 or so with Parkinson's. I knew it all along, but she went and had the formal diagnosis done. And so I said, okay, the first thing we'll do is break my rules. I want you to start on every medication the neurologist suggested for you, and you're sitting in my chair 5 days a week. We lived close enough; it was possible. So okay, I did very unfancy work with her, but it was clear that the motor system was definitely affected, right? Her gait had changed. She was walking with a cane because it was dangerous to walk without it. Her hand tremors were pretty significant. And, in general, she wasn't sleeping well. It was so many typical kinds of things. The doctor put her on some carbidopa, again, very typical markers. I had worked with a lot of Parkinson's patients in my visiting nursing work. So I was pretty familiar with the medication route. And essentially the medication route is, okay, if that much doesn't do it anymore, take more. And then if that doesn't do it, take more. And that's kind of the pressure. There's not a lot of mixing. There's a few, but mostly it's just increasing the doses. So I was expecting that. We did probably about 25 or 30 sessions with her. And she let me know that it was necessary for her to go down to Florida, where they had their winter home, because my niece was starting college and she felt she had to get her started. So she went away for a month. And when she came back, before she went away, she would come in having no cane. And I'm like, where's your cane? She goes, oh, I forgot it. To me, that's one of the best things I see people who are working with assistive devices. If they start forgetting it, they aren't needing it as much. The tremor was gone. Her gait was greatly improved. And then she went away to Florida. She was gone for a month. She came back. The tremor was back. The cane was back. I'm like, did you not take your pills while you were gone? She goes, oh, no, I took them. She had a timer, everything. And I went, well, that's weird. So you're telling me that what was away was the neurofeedback. So, okay, get back in the chair. We'll do more. And she was the first remote system I ever set up. It was more fun than anyone can imagine to deal with my parents in Florida. My dad, who's an engineer, my mom. No, I told you the yellow one. My father was very hard of hearing. No, it's the blue one. But we sort of managed some remote training. This was before Zoom and all the good things came in. And about 10 years later, now she's in her early 80s, and she started falling down all the time. Again, the tremors were gone and the gait was improved. So I was good. And she had not had any increase in dosages. So that was very unusual, I thought. But then a physical therapist came in the house, to assess and everything else. Okay, when were you diagnosed? Oh, no, I'm sorry. There's no way you were diagnosed that long ago. You would be far more advanced if you had been diagnosed that long ago. So I took away from that the fact that the neurofeedback might have had a really dramatic effect on her Parkinson's.
I would say 80% of the people I've worked with that have Parkinsonian phenomena have very strong change. And about 20% have zero impact. So, but the people that do have change, the biggest effect I see is the meds start working better and better and better. Many of them can suddenly sleep through the night without waking up to take more meds because the tremor, the rigidity doesn't flare up the same way. So the meds, basically it seems to slow down the progression pretty aggressively, especially in younger people. That's in my experience. But once someone's more progressed with strong tremor, strong dysregulation of focus, I found to be kind of hard to work with classic neurofeedback in my experience. Hard to make change.
Lisa Tatrin has done some nice work that's a little bit more systematic than just a one anecdote. There's nothing wrong with an anecdote. In fact, most clinical breakthroughs are based on an anecdote. So we need to share them when we have them. But Lisa's actually got a bunch of them. So it's like a case series instead of a case study. And she shows some very good results. And there's others that have done work with SMR. The Thompsons share anecdotes about their work in the SMR and Parkinson's. But to tie back into Brett, not everybody who has a tremor has Parkinsonism.
Oh.
And the misdiagnosis of Parkinsonism in somebody who's had head injury is not uncommon. Dementia pugilistica, the boxer's brain, mimics Parkinsonism. Now, not to say that Muhammad Ali didn't have Parkinsonism, but there are a lot of boxers that end up having Parkinson tremor that don't progress, and they simply have a static encephalopathy, a post-traumatic encephalopathy. And CTE is the quote that we heard a little earlier of 1/3 of professional NFL. That was of retired NFL people. 1/3 of them thought that they had CTE. Now, who's to argue with them? They're bigger than me, so I'm not going to argue with them. But at the same time, they're thinking that they have CTE may not be the most exact measurement of it, and it may be an undercount.
Probably is with survivorship bias, right?
Yeah.
People that have significant issues hit 37, retire, hit 42, and have gone off the deep end, or have left shuffled off the mortal coil because of significant behavioral. So it's very common for these athletes who are that hardcore to hit their mid 40s and basically check out because they just are broken. And I think a lot of that is probably head injuries and not just depression because their roles were changed or something. So
and you can have post-traumatic encephalopathy that mimics almost any psychiatric presentation, because after all, what is a psychiatric diagnosis other than a cluster of behaviors? They don't use biomarkers. So it's an awful thing to end up being in a sport that you enjoy doing that is going to end up having long-term negative consequences. And you think a gigantic salary is an offset of it, but not all of them get the gigantic salaries, but most of them end up with the head traumas. So it's a very tough circumstance. They're better treated now than they were historically. Put them straight back in the game used to be the nature of it, and now they have protocols that they have to follow before they put them in the game too early. So it's they do a better job of it, but it's still it's a natural part of a sport where you have that kind of head trauma.
Does anybody remember the name of the movie that was done more than 10 years ago? And
Will Smith,
right? Who played the neurologist?
Concussion.
Who upset the NFL so badly? Yeah, that one. If you haven't seen that one, ladies and gentlemen, watch.
I even wonder about running on what Jay was saying. The cross contamination of reasons. With more and more Parkinson's, and I think because we tend to see Parkinson's a lot in females, we kind of dismiss the notion of sports concussion. But we've talked about this before in terms of more of the fragility of the female anatomy in terms of the likelihood of having whiplash type of head injury. So Jay, do you have any insight for all of us in terms of how you can differentiate between a head injury and true brew Parkinson's? Because I know that will affect our outcome and how we look at things. We all know, as you said, that the neuro can be a potentiator of the meds, but that's presuming you're on the right meds.
Well, first of all, use the EGQG prognostically, not diagnostically, and you're using it correctly. Using it to go backwards and figure out exactly what caused something isn't really fruitful use of it. But figuring out how to go forward and make things work better is a perfectly appropriate use of it.
So Jay is no then.
But you've got to also understand that not all Parkinsonism is either traumatic or Parkinsonism as one thing that everybody knows that they used to always get, older folks got it. Now they understand that there are locations in the country where there's a location where there was a lot of TCE as one of the chemicals, but there's a whole range of chemicals that are now linked to Parkinson's type progressive dementias. And so,
we have pockets here in Canada with that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, the way we
Chicago,
discovered Parkinson's, the way we figured out some of the deep dopamine systems was because of that big drug overdose thing in LA that happened in the early 80s. It was all this spiked heroin or something spiked with a pesticide. And you had all these 25 and 30-year-olds showing up in ERs with Parkinson's suddenly.
If you go online, there's a nice story about it. It was Berkeley, and it was MDMA that was badly made. They all partied with ecstasy, and the next day, instead of just being serotonin, their dopamine systems were totally fried. They had advanced frozen posture. They're called the frozen people. Punch frozen people into a browser, you're going to find a nice story about how they were frozen. Some of them got sent over to Europe for fetal tissue implants, dopamine implants, and unfroze them. But some of them, fetal
most of them had to go
exactly
back
allowed.
and get the stem cells removed because they didn't stop growing.
Yeah.
And they ended up with dopamine tissue going the other direction and becoming excessive. So they had to go back and have the tissue removed years later.
Yeah.
So
anyway, what we've got is that the brain, when disturbed with trauma or some chemicals, can end up with a degenerative change that's going to be diagnosed as Parkinsonism, like it's a single thing. But they'll identify it based on tremor and the inability to initiate, progressively deterring ability to initiate, which is why falls happen. If you're going to walk, you have to step forward. And if you're intending to walk and you make that initial lean, but you can't get the foot to go, you're going to go down. And the implants that are done now for advanced Parkinsonism to unfreeze them and to turn off tremor end up being a reasonably expensive but a reasonably good alternative for people that have advanced Parkinson's syndrome. The subthalamus basically can be stimulated, and that can end up turning all the tremors off. If the thalamic-cortical dysrhythmia is a loss of an input, the stimulator basically puts in an input artificially, turning off the dysrhythmia. So and Dirk de Ritter puts in an implant into the auditory cortex. It overlies the auditory cortex, and after they put it in, then they figure out which one of the little pairs of electrodes that are on this little centimeter long stimulator pad has like 10 pairs on them. So they'll figure out which one of the electrode pairs ends up giving them the best result. But they basically put an artificial stimulation in where there was a loss of an input from the thalamus. They just put an input from the cortex down, and that turns off the tinnitus.
Here's a keyword grabber. Digital Ozempic. What can't Ozempic cure? Is anybody coming in and say, I want to have something like this, but I don't want to take the shot? Is that picking up any business for anybody?
They're basically working on the anterior cingulate. Hey, it's an easy spot to access. We've worked with people that had eating disorders, OCD, depression, gambling addiction, various things. So if you don't fix the anterior cingulate, the drug addiction that is pointed at will find something else. You'll do symptom substitution.
Sometimes the right insula as well for eating, for body and feeding type phenomena. So you can do a protocol across the right insula. Essentially, you have to get behind the ear though to get it right. You can't get the insula from over the right temporal because there's other tissue on top of it. You have to go behind and get across the signal. So you do like FP1 to M2, and that activates the right insula.
We like to catch it from CZ to the temporal because that bipolar pair actually shows the signal from it very, very well. In the raw EEG, you can actually see insula content as a phase reversal with nothing happening at C3, but CZ and T3 or T7 are out of phase. So it's coming from C3 laterally underneath it, hitting CZ and the temporal. So that pair shows it really well. Now, there's current studies showing MEG training of the insula can end up targeting it really well. So MEG can target the deep source without any problem, but so can S-Loretta. You can define the source and use that for feedback. I would stay away from Z-score stuff with respect to this, but you can locate the spot and train the activity at that spot without too much difficulty. That was actually shown in Lubar's lab first by Marco Congito, and they actually showed that you could control theta at the anterior cingulate, which is the one kind of OCD that medication really doesn't touch very well. So if you're doing a medication versus neurofeedback horse race, pick somebody with anterior cingulate theta as the person that has to be treated, or the group that has to be treated, and you'll find that that's an intractable pharma group, but it's a neurofeedback. We train it all the time.
Otherwise known as nail biting or songs in the head. That's front midline excessive tonic theta. You get that disinhibited stimulus-seeking obsessiveness, not ritual process-driven obsessiveness. So. Yeah.
What's the success rate with Ozempic versus neurofeedback? Can you give me an objective number, anybody?
I don't know.
For what?
Do whatever Ozempic can do.
Yeah.
I mean, for what?
So Pete, we've met in person. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think I've tried every spot on my head and every combination? Okay. So okay. First of all, I wasn't going to say this before, but the presumption of it being a food addiction is not why people are fat. Some people are, but it's not the answer. Your metabolic rate, your lifestyle, your eating, it's like
there's a bunch of different reasons too. It's all,
right.
It's not never the one thing.
It's that part of the brain. Let's go there. For some people it will be, but my understanding of Ozempic is a very simple one right now. They have figured out, and don't forget, every part of your brain gets some little bit of that, but they figured out how to slow down the digestive system. So there are consequences to doing that, and not everybody suffers terribly, but some do. But literally, the time that the food sits in your stomach is longer. The time that it takes to progress to the rest of the digestive tract is longer. So, of course, you retain a sense of fullness longer. And if it backs up often enough, try not fully digesting your food and see just how hungry and eager you are to eat. It turns that all off. So I don't think that the activity of Ozempic is much brain oriented, although the brain obviously impacts all of that digestive process. But if you can slow the digestion down.
They're also starting to see secondary studies looking at side effects, and they're seeing some cognitive effects being hinted about. There's muscle mass changes being hinted about, and that's probably not all like malabsorption or changes in absorption. It's something going on there. So,
I'm just loving watching this. I mean, I'm always a bit concerned when, one new drug is a panacea for everything. But Joy, I love what you contributed, but many other things. I mean, that could explain, why you quiet, why you calm, that full belly calmness. I'd love to watch it. But again, I'm really concerned about this panacea thing. Same thing with us, right? I mean, we can't cure everything.
What's an earworm?
What's an earworm? What's an earworm? What's an earworm? What's an earworm?
What?
Song in the head.
Yeah.
Is that the thing in JFK had? Is that what the?
No.
No,
No, that's an actual worm.
he had some kind of worm, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an actual worm.
That Star Trek worm that goes in your ear.
I thought maybe the earworm was how they
Star
worked
Trek.
into the brain worms.
Yeah, VJ, thanks for the question, though. I think we're talking again about anterior cingulate. So you generally see a theta failure mode or theta excess when songs are in your head. So you can target that. You can look at your cue. You can look at your cue. And
Or a bottle of tequila.
Yeah,
It
one of the
depends
things I find fascinating as well is when these things occur. Like a key thing, for example, with individuals with insomnia, they get these. I mean, some people have, it's not just the preservative thinking that keeps somebody awake. It's also these things that cycle through the head. They not necessarily negative things. So yeah, that's cingulate. I tell you, it's a big one.
Yeah, we publish about insomnia and beta spindles at CZ, and that does predict insomnia, but it's not the only kind of insomnia. You can have anterior cingulate rumination that keeps you awake. That's not driven by the orexin wakefulness drive.
Yeah.
The CZ beta is just the orexin wakefulness drive. It's not rumination. So you gotta. You can't just look at the symptom of insomnia and assume CZ is the problem with beta. If you see CZ beta as a problem, you can predict the insomnia, however.
Yeah.
So there was a question up here. Somebody was asking about the best way to train. I've lost it. Let me see if I can move this down a little bit.
Train memory, Joy?
No,
I would not resist.
Good.
I would not
no,
resist.
this is just
Now, Marie,
as an example. Hey, I had anesthesia, sort of, No, the question was, so we could train insula for deeper awareness with CZ minus, is that T7? Okay. I just want to make a very giant generalization to questions like this. Okay. It's something that has become part of my life more recently. My experience of the neurofeedback field is extreme, wonderful generosity. When we get together with meetings, Mari's representing us all at ISNR. We are sitting there talking to each other. Oh, I found this year. Oh, I found this year. And we share and share and share. And it comes across that it was CZ minus T7. It was great, right? And it occurs to me, and this happened with me, Andrew, with Larry. I was working on sensor integration, and I talked to Larry about it, and he came back and said, no, what you said doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm like, what? No, I have a dozen people here who it worked with. Okay. What we neglect to
different
tell
population.
Well, it was the same, right? But here's the thing. That's like, I want to go to France. Where? Well, I want to go to France. It's the geography. Okay. But he didn't say anything there about what frequencies we're going to train. I want to go train up and down. And then it gets even more fine-tuned. How are you going to manage giving that information to the brain? Are you going to, I just did a consult yesterday, and we ended up realizing that she was going to have to change the way she was inhibiting this kid's theta. That was going to have to be the star of the session. She was going to have to put more inhibit on theta and give it up in the other frequencies that she was rewarding and inhibiting. Because this kid's theta was completely out of whack, session after session after, and it wasn't changing.
Yeah. If I could jump in here, Joy, this is one of the things I'm actually presenting here in ISNR on Friday. It's actually an app, but that's beside the point. But one of the things you have to look at is mechanisms of action are not necessarily the same for each person, even though you're working at the same location. The other thing, I think it was Andrew that mentioned your population. Okay, lived experience is so important. You know, a white cat is not a tabby cat, is not a black cat, is not a Siamese cat. Yeah, they're all cats, but you know, lived experience. Maybe that's a bad example. I might be thinking about Barry here. But yeah, there's so many variables in here, and I think at these meetings, yes, we share all of that. Then we take it back to our own clinics, and instead of saying it doesn't work, we look at why did it work for my colleague and why is it different with my clients? So you either support the theory or tear it down or reconstruct theory around theory until it becomes solid practice. And I think that's one of the key things in terms of really building. And careful before you slash somebody down. You know, if they've got the data, look at it, because I see incredible variation outside of good old standard ADHD, but even there's around 5 different points of variation, to say the least. But you got to go deeper into it.
Right.
Yeah, and whether you're doing, you know, looking at raw signals, everybody knows I'm the amplitude and frequency doc here, but we all have our methods, looking a bit deeper.
Joshua, how's the Pacific Northwest? I hate to nudge you, but I miss you, bro.
It's raining. It's just raining.
How's that depression doing?
It's good. Just raining as usual.
Not November yet.
There's a huge shade out here. There was some sort of chemical spill in the neighboring town, and we got a notification this morning in the news. It was like,
oh,
great. They don't know what it is, but they know they spilled something.
Is this around Seattle? Is that where you are? Or
No,
Oregon?
I'm near Portland.
Portland. Ouch.
Mhm.
Ouch.
So we're all good here. Yeah. Just working away. We got 6 people. Busy. This is,
are these school problems coming in yet?
Yeah, I think it's a good diverse population, but we're starting to see some of the school kids come in. They usually come in January after the first round of report cards.
All right.
So,
I thought
everybody
midterm.
here probably can relate to that. Like that January is when you get the school kids in.
Pretty quiet now for most of us as people figure out whether they have problems or no problems with the school kids, that is. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think we talked about it before. It's around week 6 or so that people kind of start to question things, and then then you get the failure coming in January.
Parent teacher council
Yeah.
sessions. So
Yeah.
We
We
need
have
that
a lot of-
ADHD diagnosis.
Sorry?
You need that ADD diagnosis so you can get the extra study time for your test.
Well, as I said, nothing wrong with extra study time. I think that really helps a lot of people calm down and be able to focus. But as we mentioned before, big issue with not having to do the work or not taking some special attention at the brain, but looking at different ways people can receive and process information. Sorry, that came out wrong. Not just looking at how we can train, but also how individuals process. Yeah, it's a marriage. I mean, any of us who work with kids, most of us are not only doing neurotherapy. We're looking at neurotherapy, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at teaching methods, we're looking at processing methods. And that's where you really can hone in. Yeah. Unless you've got straightforward theta beta with straightforward theta SMR, at CZ and C4. But there's so many other things contributing to scholastic difficulties.
Mhm.
Anthony's in the middle of a hurricane or about to, and I don't know where his texts are coming from, but I'm making sure he's representing here.
Keep them alive.
John, how's LA? You got anything going out there? Everybody's saying in LA.
Yeah, and everybody's fine here. Joy and Andrew and I are enjoying the good weather. It's like, 80 degrees, sunny. It's beautiful.
Rubbing in my face over there, John.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. But
Back to visit.
maybe we'll
But I
see
don't
some
have enough-
weather in
I don't have enough
January.
hours in the day. I don't have enough hours in the day. I have as of this week now, I have 4 people on a waiting list, right? 2 of them are school kids because the parents are starting to recognize, well, there's only so many, I'm sure John, anybody who works with kids works with this one. Well, They could come in at 4 o'clock until 4:45 on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays.
That's right.
Why?
That's right.
Because it's got Cub Scouts and karate.
Send them to me. Send them to me for remote training.
Yeah.
And their
Well,
piano recitals.
Andrew, this is a really good point, Andrew. These are not families that would be good candidates for home training.
Yeah.
I've worked with it. I tried the beginning. I thought it would be so easy to do this, but you know what? They were so tired when they got home from soccer practice. We just forgot about doing it. Oh, well, I don't know how to. We just thought it was going to be so.
Yeah, home training is not easy. It's a whole different set of skills and client support that has to be brought on.
Yeah.
I have coaches on 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Every client has a real live chat that they're working with.
Wow.
It takes a different kind of boundary, different kind of communication, different kind of support. It's not a thing that most therapists want to do because it creates a different kind of relationship. I'm a biohacker and a coach and a scientist, so I'm just kind of like trying to constantly educate people. And it doesn't really matter if they're a kid with ADHD or a CEO who's drinking too much or an athlete who's trying to, recover from an injury. They got goals. I got techniques, and I have coaches to help, support setup. And so I take a very agnostic approach when it comes to where you do it. And I get better effects from my home clients than I do in the office because my home clients do more neurofeedback. They get more sessions in.
Yeah, I hear you, John, but I do want to jump in on where Joy left off. At our clinic, we will not see children after 6 p.m., period. We, in fact, even all our hours. They're too tired. It's a waste of the parents' money, the parents' time, the child's time, our time, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is we do the assessment on the child. We look at the child's EEG, et cetera. You also have to do a mini assessment on the parents, their drive, their purpose, et cetera. One of the things I talk to parents about is like, oh, well, they can't miss school. How much school, air quoting, are they missing by not dealing with the learning disability or the ADHD or the behavioral problem, et cetera, et cetera? This is a fundamental question or it's, the red herring here is, oh, they can't miss school. Sorry, I misexpressed again, but I think everybody knows what I mean. I always say missing a bit of school to get this done over the next few months is absolutely imperative. As Joy was also saying, in terms of the fatigue level of the kids, I think we talked about this before, what good parents have to do, what makes the pressure on parenting. Your little girls have to have dance lessons. Your little boys have to play soccer. Your girls and your boys have, sorry, I'm being genderist, but they have to play football. They need their music lessons, their second language lessons, their family of origin language lessons, et cetera, et cetera. These kids are exhausted. So sometimes a lot of these kids, their theta is high because they are tired. They're not performing in school because they are tired. And we haven't even looped in all the time they're spending on their devices and what time they're getting to bed. Anybody want to pick up on my rant?
Yes.
No, I'm with you 100% on that. This is about life priorities. I don't care what population of people you're working with. It's not just kids, it's anybody. You're a high-powered executive, yada, yada, yada. You got to make a decision. What do you want to do with your brain?
Right.
What do you want out of this? I remember Santiago was talking about that. Given the choice, here's your choice. You can work yourself to death, or you can have meaningful family relationships. It's your choice. Which one do you want? Santiago was very clear that they pick family. It's
also a tiny bit of a false equivalency when it comes to kids, though, because the parents are saying, look, my kid is scheduled to within an inch of their life, and they're doing all these productivity things that are super important. I have no time for neurofeedback. And what I say is, well, a couple things. One is if you add neurofeedback to the mix, all the other stuff gets easier. Plasticity goes up, and the sport learning, the weightlifting, the language gets easier. And two, they can sit and do neurofeedback while doing their homework.
Yeah.
Are they going to sit still for 3 or 4, times a week? Then set up the wires. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to pay attention to it. It's mostly involuntary. Mm-hmm. So if you can do it while doing other stuff and you're this busy and it helps other things, it ends up being more about, can you structure time enough to get it done? Not do you have the time to do it? I don't quite say that to parents.
Throw in, Andrew, one of the things that we do that is extremely successful is training while tasking. So they're doing homework while we're brain driving. That's an extremely successful method.
One thing that Maria, I don't know how much our experience will match up. I've been working with kids for a very long time now.
Yeah.
And my experience with the school situation, the parents are not at all adverse to, I'll go get them early, I'll pick them up. But then the school says, look, they haven't been in school for enough hours this week. They're going to get held back a year, or you don't graduate. So I have not found that neurofeedback becomes an acceptable reason to take them out of school. But I get parents that look, well, he doesn't have to be school until 8 o'clock. Could we do a 6:30 a.m. session?
Yeah.
I'm like, sure, if you can get the keys to unlock my office. I'm not here. But
I think it's all of it. I mean, yeah, the school in terms of the attendance, but my point is if they can't follow and they're falling behind with 100% attendance, you do the calculation. Also, the profile that you said that the parent is fine pulling them out is the teachers, but we also have the opposite where it's the parent. So yeah, I think it comes from all sides, and that's really, really important to know, simply because you need to know who to talk to.
John, can you take care of Talabo, and then Joy, can you take care of Ben?
what does Ben want to know?
Well, Talabo, when working with a child with autism, what should be prioritized first? Should sleep, meltdowns, and inflammation be addressed individually, or can they all be treated simultaneously with neurofeedback?
Yes.
Depends.
Okay, depends.
It depends.
I recommend them on long plane trips.
One point that I would bring to Talabo is that sleep is one of the easiest things for us to measure. You finding out if the neurofeedback is settled in correctly or not. It's an involuntary process. Falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping among your sleep cycles successfully. It's all important. So sleep is going to be one of the things that I'm going to want to track, right? So I'm probably going to work on something that would help with sleep. And that's going to depend on what you described to me. It isn't the same thing for every person. Then we get into, like John was saying, yes, doing some very simple, just even CZ training for an autistic child, you can tune in all kinds of things. That they become more aware, better eye contact, more relational. These are all the beginning stages showing that the neurofeedback is being successful. So at that point, you might start to prioritize. But I will tell you what I experienced. Parents come in, they tell me, okay, we need to do this, this, and this. Great example. I had a nonverbal 8-year-old girl with severe autism. And the goal she came in with, stay in the school building, because the school people were having trouble chasing her out of the building. She was running wild out of the building and in dangerous situations. So our first goal was keep her in the building. I'm like, okay, I think we can do that. So mother came in one day. She started laughing. She goes, they haven't said a word about whether it's working or not. But she said, but the teacher today said, now I want her to pay attention. I'm like, they keep raising the bar. So that's the kind of stuff you're going to see. Different priorities start shifting under different circumstances. So sometimes you have to let the brain decide where it's going to employ all this stuff. So it's not about you picking the priorities always.
Yeah, that's a good.
John,
point.
you got Ben?
No, and Talabo, just to go back to the inflammation question, you really have to figure out the nutritional platform of the child.
Yeah.
If they're not getting proper nutrition, neurofeedback is not going to be as successful as you'd like it to be. It's fighting an uphill battle. You have to solve that problem.
The question asks about treatment of autism as though it's a thing. And it's a DSM thing, and that's a pile of stuff.
Right.
So what we need to do is look at the individual rather than the DSM classification. And at that point, the things that need to be done first, second, third kind of flow out from actually the specifics of the case. If there's discharges in the temporal lobe, you can have acting out aggressive behavior that can be temporal lobe epilepsy even. So you have to look at what the EEG is doing and what the behaviors are, match them up, and you're this is personalized medicine and evidence-based treatments. So we can't go with a generalized DSM category, which isn't personalized at all. We have to actually look at some data.
What's the difference between hyperfocus and flow? Are they the same thing?
Not even close.
Go.
Hell no.
No, in a very, very simplistic, and Andrew, Jay, something, but in a very simplistic sense, I look at this as like hyperfocus is a lack of neuroplasticity. Okay, we get kids in here with horrible attention spans, but man, when they're involved in building a Lego that they want, the house has to stand up and move before they notice, right? They're hyperfocused. They're stuck. They don't have any flexibility in their attention. Flow demonstrates extreme flexibility, the ability to do this and do this. You're not hyper focused in flow. You look real focused, but you're not in the same neurological state.
All right, all. We're at 1 hour. That's it. Always leave the audience wanting more. The esteemed panel, thank you for showing up like you always do.
Joshua Moore is on the panel, so we always leave them wanting more here.
Oh, ow.
Mow.
Good one. Good one.
We will have our regular Thursday show tomorrow to be talking about what we didn't get discussed here. And like I said, every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. And then occasionally Singapore, which would be Thursday morning sometime.
He's in Chicago. So
INSR, okay. Got it. For everybody that's in Chicago, come by the Cubby Bear Friday night. I will be performing very mediocrely. If somebody wants to come by and laugh.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Hey, great live chat. See you in a week.
if you laugh at his bass playing, you'll find out why they call it an axe.
Ooh, the burn.
Oh, I'm losing the internet.